Okay, Ethan, thanks for joining me on Real Vision.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Maybe for the audience that isn't familiar with your background, you could do a little bit of an intro into, you know, how you got into the space and a bit of your background. I know you come from a pretty diverse background compared to some other people. You're not from finance, so take it away.
So I think a lot of people, well, maybe on Real Vision, a lot of people are finance, but in the cryptocurrency world, there's I think a lot of diversity in background. So my pedigree, I guess, is in biophysics. That's what I studied in university. Specifically, I was interested in the problem of the origin of life and how it is in a universe that's allegedly always running down, according to the second law of thermodynamics, that we have, organisms and ecosystems and these phenomenal beings that run themselves up, so to speak, that, this sort of incredible phenomenon of emergence. And this was really what I was studying and trying to understand, and slowly starting to apply it to, the political realm, the economic realm as well, as I was learning about, the nature of economics and the financial system, and came across Bitcoin. And it sort of dawned on me that, this was back in 2013, that what we were seeing with Bitcoin was the same phenomenon I was studying in the biophysical medium, but happening in the digital medium, the sort of origin of life, right? There's these emergent coordinating, sustainable organisms, essentially. And so that really struck me that, if the internet was this sort of revolution in biological communication, that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies were this revolution in coordination. And that was really powerful for me. And I went pretty much all in to the cryptocurrency world at that point. I was doing a master's degree, or had just started a master's degree that was supposed to be in machine learning. But I spoke to my professor and I was like, look, either I'm not going to do a master's degree at all, or it's going to be on cryptocurrencies or blockchains. And he was like, as long as it counts as computer engineering, you're good with me. So I was fortunate to have a very, very flexible and supportive advisor. And so I ended up doing my thesis on Tendermint, which was, the project I had co-founded with Jay Kwan at the time. The thesis was called Tendermint, Byzantine Fault Tolerance in the Age of Blockchains, and sort of really dove into the contextualizing what was happening in the blockchain space and proof of stake and so on in the sort of longer tradition of the academic study of consensus protocols. That's how I got started. And then we could talk about Cosmos and so on. Yeah.
Sounds good. And for those that maybe aren't as familiar, Tendermint is the consensus engine that powers Cosmos, and as well now a bunch of other chains in the cryptocurrency space. Maybe let's step back a bit. Like at what point did you start to get into the cryptocurrency space? Like you mentioned around 2013. Like what was that trigger?
I had started to be turned on a little bit to, the problems in the financial system, and sort of most of my life, I imagined, after I got over the fact that I wasn't going to be in the NBA, probably when I was like 14 or something, as all young boys do, I guess. I was like, okay, I'll be a professor, right? I'll hang out in the ivory tower and whatever. And I guess sometime in 2011 or 2011, 2012 era, I started learning about the financial system and the sort of structure of the economy, and started listening to podcasts and gold bugs, and learning a little about the sort of Austrian view and stuff like that. Bought my first bars of silver and drained my bank accounts, and just a young irresponsible 20-year-old, and pretty much had become disenchanted as people do when they start learning about these things. And so in early 2013, I'd heard about Bitcoin in 2012, I think, but I didn't really understand it. I went to the Wikipedia page. There were like too many things I didn't get, so I just sort of moved on. And then in 2013, it came up again. And so I dug in and spent time actually trying to understand, okay, what is this Merkle tree thing? What is this, cryptographic signature thing? And it started to click. And it was really, I think, the Cyprus bail-in crisis in 2013, where there was, the sort of in the midst of the Eurozone crises of that time, where, the government bailed in the banks by giving, depositors a haircut. And that was sort of, I think, illuminating for a lot of people, not just me, but for a lot of people, that was the first time they really sort of were like, oh man, the banks aren't safe. We need a different sort of safe asset, something that's digitally native. And that was Bitcoin. And that was the first time I actually, tried to purchase a Bitcoin. And I had been trying for a few weeks, and I was pretty annoyed that I couldn't purchase the new internet money over the internet. And I had to actually find a human being in Toronto and go into his shop and give him cash. And so that was kind of frustrating. It's a little bit better today, but honestly, not by much. So yeah, that was sort of how I got into it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, it was a little bit later, but it was kind of, seeing similar things. I think like a lot of people in the space, there's a bunch of events that kind of added up to then going like, there's something a little bit different here. There may be a different way of doing things compared to what we grew up with. Take me to, how did you come up with Tendermint and how you kind of got into Cosmos? Like, how did you make that switch, or what was the trigger in your mind where like, I'm going to make a new consensus mechanism?
Sure. So I can't take credit for inventing Tendermint. So that was my partner, Jay Kwan. And so that was in 2014. So, by early 2014, we had all seen the Ethereum white paper. Being in Toronto, there was a pretty heavy Bitcoin meetup scene, and Vitalik was there, and a lot of the early Ethereum people, and it sort of became, something of an Ethereum meetup. And so we were going there, every week or every couple of weeks, and, getting Vitalik to teach us about like Merkle trees and, however all this stuff worked. But that was also around the time that people were starting to think about new models of proof of stake, essentially, right? Ways to deal with the problems of proof of work. And there were already a few sort of existing proof of stake competitors like PP Coin or, NXT, I think already existed around that time. But the problems with them was that they, as people would say, in proof of stake, you have nothing at stake. Right. Which was sort of this, ironic quip that people would throw around. And so early that year, Vitalik had come up with this idea of what he called Slasher at the time, where to participate in a proof of stake consensus protocol, you would have to actually make some deposit of your stake and lock it up so that there would be something at stake. And if you were later found to misbehave or try to cause a fork, you would lose that deposit. And that was very inspiring for a lot of people. And it was around that time that it was like, okay, Ethereum is going to ultimately move to proof of stake. Of course, we're, 7 years later and we're not quite there yet, but there's been a lot of progress. But anyway, I think it was around June that Jay Kwan came up with the Tendermint protocol, and he was sort of, going through older academic literature on Byzantine fault tolerance and consensus protocols, and found some stuff that he could understand and could basically modernize into the blockchain context, and that he felt he could use for public cryptocurrencies and so on. And so, I had heard him on a podcast talking about Tendermint, this new consensus without mining approach, and I was pretty taken with that. And sort of later in 2014, I was working for a company now known as Monax, then they were called Eris. They were basically the first company to try to commercialize the Ethereum technology, to bring the Ethereum virtual machine and so on to enterprises. And we knew that in order to do that, we needed a better consensus algorithm. We couldn't use the, Nakamoto consensus and the proof of work and so on. So we were looking for an alternative. And so when we came across Tendermint, we were like, oh, this is maybe this, not only could this work because it uses, classic academic consensus protocols that could work in enterprise, but it could also work for the future of cryptocurrencies and blockchains more generally. And so that sort of kicked off my collaboration with Jay. And so I was sort of like his, first follower, so to speak. And we sort of co-founded the project moving forward from there together. And by 2016, after I'd published my master's thesis on Tendermint, we were looking to actually now sort of move away from the enterprise model and bring this consensus protocol to life in the public realm, right? Going back to the roots of sort of public cryptocurrency networks and solving some of the outstanding problems in the existing cryptocurrency network: speed, scalability, security, flexibility, and so on. And so that led us to come up with this model for Cosmos, which was the idea that, in the future, there's going to be many, many blockchains, thousands, if not millions of them. They can't use proof of work, obviously, because it's too destructive and energy intensive. So we need a friendly, sustainable alternative. And that is the model of Tendermint and proof of stake. And we want each community and each group of individuals or whoever wants to start such a chain to have sort of ownership over their blockchain sovereignty, as we call it, and yet still have all the different chains be able to interoperate with each other. And so, from that sort of desire and motivation emerged the Cosmos vision and values of sovereignty and interoperability, of a world of millions of chains where each community is sort of sovereign in their own right and yet interoperable with all the others. And that sort of birthed the Cosmos project in the summer of 2016. And, 5 years later, we're starting to actually realize that vision with now, over $100 billion, I think, worth of market cap on different Cosmos-based blockchains. And our inter-blockchain communication protocol, IBC, is now live. So those chains can start to communicate with each other. And, there's a lot more coming.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto. It's 100% free. Sign up now.